Welcome, everyone. I'm Kevin Theos, the president of the USPTA Southern Division, and I'm delighted to introduce Dr. Gregg Steinbergg. Dr. Steinbergg is a professor of sports psychology, and he's been the mental coach to many professional and amateur tennis players. He was the mental coach to the Vanderbilt men's tennis team that were in the finals of the NCAA championships. He's the head sports psychologist for the International Association of Tennis Psychology, and you can learn more about him at drgregsteinbergg.com. Dr. Steinbergg, welcome.
Well, Kevin, thanks for having me today. And wow, I appreciate all you here today on this webinar. My goal is to help you with the mental game. As you can see, the title is The 5 Fundamentals of Mental Toughness in Tennis. Let me first tell you a little bit about myself so you get a feel of my background and where I come from. I started as a junior tennis player. Yes, that's me. That's a hair don't, if you were wondering. And look at those shorts. Wow, they went out of style, thank God. And then we used to play with, of course, wood rackets, and you can see the cars in the background. But I was a junior ranked tennis player in Southern California. I loved it, played every weekend, drove all over Southern Cal, and just loved playing competitive tennis as a junior. And the one thing I realized back then was that there was a lot of tennis players that had amazing talent, but some of them could never win. And there was other players that had, so talent, and they always won. And that always fascinated me. And so when I went to college, I went on a quest to basically figure out what made people successful under pressure. I went to UC Santa Barbara, and I studied psychology, went to Florida State, and I studied performance psychology, got my master's there, went to University of Florida, got my PhD in performance psychology, and everybody asked me, who do you root for, Florida State or University of Florida? And I say, well, whoever has a better team that year, because you know how that works. And then I've been teaching at Austin Peay State University, which is near Nashville, for the last 22 years in sports psychology. So tonight, I'm going to give you a really strong background in the research and the science, but also I want you to know I've also worked with a lot of collegiate teams. As Kevin was saying, I worked with the Vanderbilt men's team that went to the NCAA, and a few of those, they went to the finals. A few of those players turned professional, worked with a lot of juniors. And so it's kind of like a 360 approach. You know, I have the science background. I played competitive tennis, so I know how it feels to feel anxious and nervous and confident. And also I work as a mental coach. So I'm going to share with you all those experiences today. But let me first tell you that when people find out I'm a sports psychologist, I always get two main questions. The first question is, what percentage of tennis is mental? Is it 40%, 30%, 50%? Well, I like to say this. Tennis is 100% mental, 100% physical. You can't tease one from the other because they're totally interconnected. Because when you're playing bad, you're thinking bad, and when you think bad, you play bad, and you can get in this downward spiral. Or conversely, when you're thinking good, you're playing better, and you start even thinking even better, and you get this upward spiral. So they're totally interconnected. The biggest problem that I see is people appreciate the mental game, right? I know that's why you're on this webinar, because you appreciate the mental game. The biggest problem is most people don't know how to work on the mental game. When they play poorly, they go work on the physical game, whatever it is, hit more serves, hit more volleys. But in a lot of cases, it was their thinking and their emotions that made them not play as well. So today, one of my goals is to share with you some really simple but effective strategies to work on the mental game. And I always get the other question is, why do some players play really well under pressure and can raise their game, and other players basically choke? Well, I have talent, you have talent, everybody has talent, but some people, they have mental juice that pushes their talents down, and they never can play well under pressure. Where other players, they have the right mental juice, and it raises their game under pressure. And a really good way to explain this is, and I do this in my class, is with this orange, right? So let me ask you, first question, if I squeeze this orange, what comes out? Orange juice, right? Not pineapple juice, always orange juice. Simple, right? Little harder question. Question 2, why does orange juice come out? Because that is what is inside. Third question, what have you put inside? If you put in fear and negativity and doubt, that's what comes out when you get squeezed. We all get squeezed on the tennis court. We all get squeezed in life. That's the human condition. But the most successful tennis players, they have put in the right mental juice. They put in peace of mind, confidence, joy. And so when they get squeezed, because we all get squeezed, they can raise their game under pressure. And so tonight, it's my goal to help you put in the right mental juice so that you can raise your game under pressure, so that you can perform in the storm, I like to say. And that is playing your best when it really counts. And what I want to do, and I like this explanation, is that you need a system to understand how all the pieces fit, right? And a framework. When you understand a framework, then you can kind of put the pieces in. That's kind of how my mind works. So I want to explain to you what I've learned over my 30 years of coaching athletes. I call it the MAP mental game system. It's really simple, but it's really impactful, okay? M stands for you are your best model, right? So you can't really copy Rafa Nadal's mental game. You can't copy Roger Federer's mental game, even though those guys are amazingly great, and Serena Williams. The idea is that you have to be your own best model because we're all unique. And you have to figure out what makes you tick, not what makes Rafa tick or Roger tick, but what makes you tick. And the idea is you have to kind of go back in time and say, well, when I was playing my best tennis, what was I thinking and feeling? What caused me to do that? Because that's the secret. You are your best model. And then it goes to number 2, or A, which is you have to attune yourself to what you were doing right, okay, and your strengths. Now, it's easy to focus on the negative, right, what you're doing wrong, when you're a slump, what's going wrong. But that's the irony of it. When I say irony, I mean this, is when you focus on negative, all your energy goes to the negative, right? When you focus on your weaknesses, they become more weak. The idea is that your energy will go towards where you focus it. So if you focus on what you're doing right and correct, then basically that's the direction you want to move. So one of the secrets of sports psychology is to figure out what you're doing right and move in that direction. And then ultimately, you want to create positive, effective habits. Because we know in psychology, under pressure, we go to our habits. When we get squeezed, we go to our habits. So once you know yourself, once you know the direction to go, because that's what works for you, then you make effective habits to go in that direction over and over and over again, so that when you get squeezed, you raise your game under pressure. So that's the MAP mental game system. It's basic. But I want to share with you how it works with what I think are the 5 mental keys, which are self-awareness. You got to know yourself. Confidence basically is a choice, but you always have to make sure you are confident, because that's how you're going to play your best tennis. You have to harness the power of anxiety. You have to be in the moment and focus, and you have to be inspired to compete and practice. Those 5 are, to me, the key mental game components. So I'm going to share with you how we can enhance those today and how you can enhance them, but also how I know a lot of you are teachers and coaches, and how you can enhance those in other your students and your players. So I want to talk about, I don't know if you saw this match, but it was pretty amazing. So it's the U.S. Open, 3rd round. She's playing Coco Gauff, Naomi, and she's basically totally inspired. So Osaka's saying how she's like just so inspired for this match. It was a big deal. I don't know if you remember at the U.S. Open, they're making a big deal about Coco Gauff, and she's like, this the teen sensation, and Osaka knew her, right? And they were actually friends. And so she got pumped up for that match, right? And she won. It was a great match. That was some of the best tennis I've ever seen her play. I know she won the Australian Open, but she wasn't playing very good after that. But during this match, she was playing fantastic. And then the match after, she loses. Why? Well, it's not so much why. It's what made her play so well. And I think it was her intensity level. She got to a 90. Let's say out of 100 is key, and 0, you're flat. So 100 is the top, 0, you're flat. She was probably at a 90. And so when we talk about self-awareness, for Osaka, she needs to know she has to get to a 90 to play her best. And when she's not there, she's probably not at her peak. And that's the same thing that when I work with athletes, I basically say, this goes back to the MAP, mental game system, when you were at your best, what were you doing right? And so I ask them these questions. And what I want you to do right now is to think about how this works with you, right? So think about a time you were in the zone. We call it peak performance or flow. Just recall a tennis match, right? You were in the zone. What were you thinking and feeling? Like, what was your intensity level? Was it a 90? Was it a 40? Was it a 30? Were you confident? Were you nervous? Sometimes we're nervous when we play our best. Was there anything about that match? You know, was your friends watching you? Were you playing against your friend? Whatever it is. And then also you kind of have to, you don't want to emphasize this, but you also want to work on what were you doing wrong, in terms of when you choked in the past. You don't want to totally focus on that, but at least you need to know about that. You know, maybe it's because you were ultra nervous or your intensity level was low, right? And then ultimately you have to know why. But the best thing you can do is think about 3 or 4 times when you were in the zone and create a pattern, right? We'll come back to this in a minute. But what is a pattern? You'll see a pattern. Maybe you were really confident. Maybe your intensity level was a 40. It wasn't a 90. It was a 40. And maybe you were a little nervous before the match, because we're going to talk about how you can harness that energy. So the secret is know yourself. You are your best model. You are not going to be like Rafa. You have to be you, and figure out what makes you the best player, right? And so, there's other questions, in terms of the why factor. Why do you have peace of mind sometimes when you play? Why are you totally confident? Why are you inspired to practice? Figure out the why, what makes you tick, and then you can move in the right direction. So that's the why factor, but it's about self-awareness. And when you understand these why questions, then you can move in the right direction. Or if you're working with a student, same thing. You can help them move in the right direction, because that's what it's all about, right? Helping them move in the right direction, avoiding the wrong direction, because bad habits are hard to break. So I want to talk about the number 2 key, which is confidence is a choice. When I work with young athletes especially, I always say, hey, sometimes that train leaves the station in terms of confidence. It's hard to get back when you're playing bad. But you always have a choice to be confident. That is your power, to choose to be confident. I don't care how bad you're playing. I don't care how many double faults you just made. I don't care how many times you hit in the net. You can still choose to be confident. I know it's hard, and I'm going to share with you some tools to do that, but you can also always choose to be confident. Why do I have a picture about Serena Williams here? Well, one of my favorite stories, she's playing with her sister Venus, right? And they've won a lot of doubles tournaments. And this is true. Actually, Serena wrote about this, and she said, I'm playing with Venus, and she's losing confidence. We're not playing well, and she doesn't she's losing motivation. And I said, look, we are here to win. We are here to play our best and not give up hope. And we are gonna win. And I'm paraphrasing, but ultimately she chose to be confident. And the idea is that's what makes Serena Williams, what most people think, the greatest player of all time in terms of the women's tour. Some people say it's both tours, but the idea is she's an amazing player, regardless of who you think is the best of all time. And we don't see a lot of that mental stuff. That's why it's cool to read stories about what she's thinking. And it showed you she chose to be confident, and ultimately they went on to win that match. So what I want to say also is, in tennis, you have these peaks and valleys, right? During a match, you have some games where you just stink, right? And then you get back up, and some games you just stink. The idea is that when you're in that downward slide, you got to choose to be confident. You can't give up hope. You can't overthink yourself. You can't doubt yourself. And then you're going to get back right up on that, upward slide. And the idea is you got to know that during some games, during some matches, during some seasons, you're going to go kind of, let's say, in a mini slump. And that's okay. That's the way it works. You have to accept it, but also you can't just throw out, your mental game and start over. A lot of times you just basically have to choose to be confident, and you'll get right back up and play your best tennis again. Well, I know that's easier said than done. So I want to give you some keys on how to choose to be confident in a pragmatic way, right? So to me, there's 4 main ones. What you say, which is self-talk, which we talked about with Serena Williams. What you think, visualization, imagery, which we're going to talk a little bit about in a minute. How you act, and what you do. Okay, but I want to ask you a question. Out of these 4, which one is the most important? So what do you think? Out of these 4, which one is the most important for your confidence? Let me give you an example, and you'll see my point. I'm 5'8". I'm going to tell myself I can dunk a basketball. I can dunk a basketball. I can dunk a basketball. I'm going to see myself dunk. I'm going to see myself dunk. I'm going to be totally confident I can dunk. I can't even touch the net. There's no way I can be confident I can dunk a basketball. So it's number 4. What you do is the essence of confidence. And I call that the meat. And the other 3 are real important. They're kind of more like the spices. So if you can do it, like hit a serve over the net, then you can use those, right? But the idea is you got to be able to do it or be close to the act. And so I want to focus a little bit on number 4, just a little bit. But, when you're working with kids playing tennis, having them serve at the tee line builds confidence, right? You got to do baby steps. I mean, that's kind of the thing. That's really how you build confidence. I don't want to totally focus on that. I want to focus on the other 3. So what you say, okay? When I was in high school, I had to say, I'm bringing my A game. I am bringing my A game, which meant I'm totally prepared. I'm never going to give up. I'm going to try to the last point. I am bringing it. And that really helped me. It just was something that burned inside. It held me. That was kind of my saying, right? Well, again, going back to the mental game system, you have to figure out what works best for you. That saying, bringing your A game, might not do anything for you or your players, but you got to figure out what works. So the best way I tell my players is I say, okay, let's look at when you're in the zone. And you write down 3 or 4 times you were in the zone. We did that earlier. And then you kind of circle some words that have they're emotionally charged words, whatever it is. And those can be used as your buzzwords to build confidence, like find the fire or be at peace, right? Or you can have images like, when you're playing your best, you're just at peace with the world. It doesn't matter. Whatever works for you is the secret. And yes, that's the North Shore Kauai, if you're wondering. But the idea is that you got to figure out what works for you. And when you figure out what works for you, then you can bring it. And so it's all about you and finding the right direction. So let me go on to the next one. And I'm going to talk a little bit about visualization, imagery. But before I do, I'm going to say that imagery and visualization is very much a mind-body connection. It really shows us the mind-body connection. So I just want to share with you, I have a string, and this is a paper clip at the bottom, right? And I do this in my class. I'm going to hold up the string, right, the paper clip. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to visualize the paper clip moving parallel to my body. You can see it moving, and I'm not moving my hand at all. My hand is totally still. That's the mind-body connection. It's very subtle, very subtle. And the idea is that when you see the ball go in, let's say you're about to serve and you see it go to that spot, you're more relaxed. When you see it missing, going to the net, you get more tight. And the idea is, or tighter, and the idea is that it's very subtle, but very powerful. A visualization creates that interconnection between the mind and body. That's why the physical game and the mental game are totally interconnected. And Novak right there says a big part of his mental package is visualization. He uses a lot of visualization. Another thing I wanted to say was some people have a tough time visualizing. And I say, we talk with our hands. You can see I'm talking with my hands. We eat with our hands. Also, if you use your hands, it helps you visualize. Let's say you're about to return serve, and you're thinking, he's going to hit out, or she's going to hit out to my, to my forehand, and I'm right-handed, and I'm going to, hit this cross court. And you might just kind of do this a little bit and visualize that shot cross court. It will increase your confidence. So using your hands helps you to visualize. And let me just say, the greater the visualization, the greater the feel. Most of tennis is all about feel, right? Once you get to a certain level, it's not so much about mechanics, it's about feel. And so the greater your visualization, the greater your feel. The other thing you could do is when you've played really well, I call it the Golden Nugget book. You write down a few, let's say a match, and you could write down maybe, I blistered this forehand cross court. And just write down what it was thinking, what you were thinking and feeling and how, and you put that in your Golden Nugget book and you look at that. And, and you keep that nugget book in your tennis bag, and you look at that, every once in a while, and you have, 20 of these golden nugget shots, or, times you played really well. That will create these positive visualizations for you. Again, it's all about developing positive, effective habits, the ones that work for you. So how to act. Okay, Nick, we all know this guy has more talent than, just incredible talent, right? I love watching him play. I love it. But, when the umpire, or ref, I should say, says, or umpire, it says something that he doesn't like, sometimes he flips out, and then his body language is so negative, and, that's over. He's over. As soon as his body language goes, he's over. That's why I love watching him. Number one, he's got all this talent. But remember we talked about earlier, some people have these emotions and talents which push their greatness down. Well, Nick is a perfect example about that. But on the flip side, this is my favorite player, I think, to watch in terms of the mental game, Diego Schwartzman. I love this guy. I mean, what is he, 5'5", 5'6"? But he's like David and Goliath sometimes, and he's great, right? He's got immense talent. Can't doubt that. But he's so positive, right? He's just like, he's just so, you could tell, I mean, he never gets negative language, body language. He's so positive. The other thing I liked, I just wanted to share with you that he does, see how he has his hat on backwards? A lot of times what he does is his hat comes up. Watch this when you watch him play. It kind of like pops up after the point, and then he pops it down to start the point. It's like, this is what I'm starting, my focus point. I think that's really cool. He's doing a lot of stuff. If you're a sports psychologist, you kind of key in on, and he's, his mental game is just so outstanding. And that's one of the reasons why he's such a great player. So I just want to talk a little bit about something that I think you'll like. So this webinar is really sponsored by the International Association of Tennis Psychology. I'm the executive director. If you go to masteringtennispsychology.com, what you'll see is the 5 sections we're talking about today, but every section has videos, articles, and applied exercises. Now, the confidence section, you can see a sample section, is free. You can see a bunch of videos, articles. You can get a free ebook just to go to the site. Now, this is this online tennis psychology course has been approved by the USPTA for continuing education. I think 3 or 4 credits. And I don't have it on here. I have it on the last slide. But if you want to take the course, we have a promo code. And I'll have it on the last slide. It's USPTA 175. The course typically costs $399. At the end, you get a certificate from the International Association of Tennis Psychology. But we have a thing with the USPTA members. You can take it for $175. But again, you can just go to the site, watch some free videos, get your ebook. I just wanted to share with you that site because I think some people are really interested in a more advanced mental game stuff. And, today's webinar is just kind of touching, little spots. And this one, the course is, really involved. I did it with a few other people, And the idea is, it's my 30 years working as a mental coach, so you get a big background in a variety of areas. So let's move on, and let's talk about the third key. Harness the power of anxiety. Well, let me go back and say 40,000 years ago, we were hunters and gatherers, and we were really afraid of dying. Now, fear is what causes anxiety. So all fear causes anxiety. It's a direct link. Well, we're not afraid of dying anymore, but when we step on the tennis court, we're afraid of looking foolish. We're afraid of letting our parents down, our friends down, our coaches down. And that fear creates all that anxiety. But going back to 40,000 years ago, to survive in this hostile world, we had to either fight or run like heck. And that's the fight or flight response. And that creates all these hormones in our body. And it can make us superhuman. It can make us think better. It can make us have greater feel. You know, the woman, you ever heard the story about her son is pinned behind the car and she lifts it up? And you're like, there's no way that could happen. Well, it can, because these hormones can make us superhuman. But here's the secret. It's how we label these situations, right? So Billie Jean King, right? I know everybody's a fan of Billie Jean King. She wrote a book which relates to this exact principle. Pressure is a privilege. Or I like to say, turn pressure into pleasure. But what she's saying is, hey, when I was in the finals of Wimbledon, I saw it as a privilege, an honor. And that's how she harnessed that energy. And that's how she played better, right? When you see it as a challenge and you see it as a joy, you move that energy in the right direction. So fear and anxiety is really just an energy source. And when you label it correctly, you move it in the right direction. When you label it wrong, like, I'm going to choke again. Oh, I played terrible under pressure. Then basically it goes in the wrong direction. So, when you turn pressure into pleasure, you play your best under pressure. And it's all about thinking and how you think about it. And, that's just touching just a little bit of anxiety, but that's how you harness the power of anxiety. It can heat up your house or it can burn you down. And that's how you perform in the storm, right? You label it as pleasure, and that's how you perform in the storm. But let me also say that anxiety is not only what you think, it's also what you feel, right? When you're nervous, you have butterflies. Your throat gets all tight. My ears get all tingly. My eyes go, everybody's a little different, right? So the idea is you can label it, but sometimes anxiety can become a habit. So you need to meditate. I know Bianca has talked about how she meditates, and that's a big part of her mental game package. A lot of players do. But the idea is that, let me explain meditation and why it's so important. Meditation, or we also call it the relaxation response, actually, when you're good at it, becomes more powerful than the anxiety response. That's that last sentence. So once you get good at meditation, it can basically overcome your anxiety to a strong degree, not get rid of it entirely, but, so it doesn't become overwhelming, right? But you got to practice it. You have to be good at it. And the easiest way to do it is this. Let's say in the evening, after a warm shower, you just close your eyes. You do some, deep breaths. You relax your toes, you relax your calves, you relax your thighs, and then you move up, to your chin and your forehead and the top of your head. You just do that for 5 minutes. And then you're in a nice, relaxed moment, right? And as you're breathing out, you say a word like cool or smooth. Then that word gets associated with that relaxed state, and you bring that on to the tennis court, like at the start of your tennis serve. We'll talk about pre-shot routine in a minute. You can do that at the start of your routine or when you're about to return. Whatever it is, the idea is a lot of stuff you want to do off the golf court, tennis court, and bring it onto the tennis court. And, it's not all just done on the tennis court. So once you've mastered like the feeling of relaxation, you can bring that onto the tennis court. And then when you get really nervous, like we all do, because you've mastered it, you'll get calm instantly. Guarantee. It's called classical conditioning. It works for everybody. And you got to get good at it to make it work. But, 3-4 weeks of meditation, maybe 3-4 times a week, you'll be good at it, and you'll like it. It feels really good. I teach sports psych at Austin Peay. Been doing it for 22 years. And I start my class, my sports psych class, we do let's say 5 minutes of meditation. Well, I had this, this is a really cool story. I had this gentleman, he was in the war, and he had post-traumatic stress disorder. And he was in my class, and we're doing meditation. And about, let's say, 5 weeks during the semester, he wrote me an email, and he said, you know, my mind was really foggy, and now it's cleared up because of the meditation. I'm like, wow, that's amazing. And it does. There's just so many benefits to meditation besides performance benefits. There's a lot of health benefits. So I really recommend that you meditate. I've been meditating for 30 years. So we got to get, okay, so that's good. That was a little blip in the system. Okay, so let's do number 4. Number 4, be in the moment. So one of my favorite players is Rafa, of course, right, to watch. From a mental game standpoint, it doesn't get better than this. And what I say is success leaves clues, right? And what do I mean by that? Well, what makes him so great? He plays every point at the same intensity level. So let's say he plays every point all out at 90%, right? Well, how does that help his mental game? Well, if your focus is to play every point at 90%, you're not worried about score. You're totally in the process. You're not worried about outcome. And so your emotions don't go up and down. You know, if you're all about outcome and score, your emotions are going to go up and down, right? If your match point down or your break point down or whatever it is, your emotions are going to go up and down. But if you play every point at the same intensity level, your emotions stay pretty, stellar. And that's, I think, what Rafa's like secret weapon is he plays every point the same. You've seen it, right? Every point's the same. And that's why he's so mentally strong. And I'm not saying he's the only one that does it like that, but I'm saying it's apparent how he plays. And so success leaves clues. And, we always talk about being in the moment. Well, how are you in the moment? Well, if you're focusing on playing at a certain intensity level, every point, you're not worried about score. You get out of the moment. You get out of the focus when you're about outcome. But if you're all about just focusing on your intensity level, then you can keep your emotions and your mental game at the highest level, like Rafa. So I want to talk also about a pre-shot routine. And I think a lot of people get the pre-shot routine wrong. We all know what a pre-shot routine is, right? But let's say before the serve, right? And what we all, let me talk about what an effective pre-shot routine is. It has the 3 R's. Relax, you're relaxed, you have a reactive mind, and you have rhythm, okay? So a pre-shot routine is not just bouncing the ball and serving, it is about doing the same things, but it's also having the right mental, emotional set before your serve. And I'm just saying serving, it could be for, service return. But really a pre-shot routine, what it's doing is it's creating this bubble around you so the pressure bounces off. It's like an emotional bubble so that the pressure bounces off so you can perform in the storm, right? So let me talk about what the 3 R's, and you got to figure out what works for you. So I think for serve, you want to kind of shrug, you get the tension out of your shoulders and breathe. And you could you've been working on your meditation, breathe out and say your word, like cool or smooth, whatever works for you. That's the start of your routine. And the other thing is, I call it the reactive mind. You're focusing on a target and you're trying to hit to a target. And I call that once you step onto the service line, you're in the play box, and once you're in the play box, you got to let go of the analytical thoughts. You can't think about your service motion. You're just thinking target. When you're walking up, you can think of a little bit about your service motion, but once you're at the service line, you're in the play box, and you have to have a reactive mind. I know a lot of you heard this term called paralysis by analysis, where we freeze up when we think too much. You got to get into the play box. You got to get reactive. And so that's really important. You got to have a reactive mind in the pre-shot routine, and you have to have rhythm. I have this guy right here, Federer. His service motion is so rhythmical. I love it. And the idea is that what you do prior to your serve, what I mean by your pre-shot routine, if it's rhythmical, then your service motion is rhythmical, right? So if you're like, you bounce, watch what he does right before the serve. It's so rhythmical, right? If you bounce fast, then your service motion is going to be faster. Or if you're fast and sometimes you're slow, it throws off your rhythm. You've got to have a consistent rhythm. I'm a little bit old, and the person who I loved to, let's say, emulate his service motion was John McEnroe, right? That was my time when I played tennis. If you watch his service motion, his first down was kind of short, then it went down farther, and then it went down, and then, boom. It was just so rhythmical. I mean, he's an artist, right? John McEnroe is an artist, and you can see that in his service motion and his game. But the idea is that when you have a pre-shot routine that promotes relaxation, promotes a reactive mind, and promotes rhythm, you're preparing yourself for excellence. And that's all you can do, prepare yourself for excellence. And so watch a lot of these great players, like Federer, and watch what he does prior to his service motion. You can see it's very rhythmical. The other thing I want to say is if you bounce, let's say, the ball 3 times, always bounce it 3 times. Don't bounce it twice sometimes. Don't bounce it 4 times, because if you bounce it differently, it tells your body something. But if you bounce it 3 times when you're playing with your buddies, when you're practicing your serve at home, and you always bounce it 3 times, your body's saying, oh, it's just a fun match. But if you bounce it 3 times when you're playing with your buddies, and then in a tournament you start bouncing it 5 times, it's telling your body what is wrong. And then your muscles tighten up. So you got to be consistent. So that rhythm thing promotes consistency. And again, it's all about what works for you. Maybe you like bouncing it twice. Maybe you like bouncing it 4 times. Maybe you like the rhythm 1 and go, or 1 and 2 and go. It doesn't matter. What works for you, move in that direction. You are your best model. Remember the MAP mental game system. You are the best model. So let me tell you another aspect of focus. So the post-shot routine. So Ken Flack, you probably heard that term. Remember Flack and Seguso? They were, an amazing doubles partnership. They won Wimbledon, U.S. Open, the gold medal in '88. So I got to work with Ken Flack at Vanderbilt. He was the coach for Vanderbilt men's tennis. And I worked with his team for about 4 or 5 years. Great guy. Great guy. And he's a better coach. They went to the NCAA finals one year when I was working with them. Just a great experience working with him. And he used to tell me after, in doubles, when the point was over, he would walk up the doubles alley. He never walked in the middle, always up the doubles alley. That was kind of a way for him to let go of the last point. That's what I'm getting at here, is you have to let go of negativity. So I have a little demonstration here. It's a paper airplane. So if I basically fly this paper airplane, it goes across the room, right? What if I put a lot of pennies on that paper airplane? What would it do? Crash and burn. Same thing. Look at this guy. You start having all those negative thoughts, to the next point, you're going to crash and burn. You're grounded. You got to let go of those negative thoughts. So you got to have some type of trigger. Some people play with their strings. You might just say next point. You might just brush off. Ken Flack walked up the double alley. It doesn't matter, but you need some type of trigger. Remember what works for you to let go of that negativity. And therefore you play the next point with a free mind, with all that heavy negativity on you. So it should be a mental trigger and also a physical trigger if you can do it. This is a physical trigger, and you just say next point, boom. And again, it's developing routines that help you play your best. The other thing I want to talk about is this, and everybody has a problem with this. We're all multitaskers. We do 5 things at once, right? But the biggest problem is when you practice being distracted, you become distracted. We become our habits. So, for instance, your son starts talking about homework and your mind starts wandering. Or you're at your job and your colleague's talking about something, your mind wanders. Well, guess what? When you're on the tennis court, your mind's going to wander because you practiced allowing your mind to wander. But if you're in the moment and your son talks to you about homework and your colleague talks about the project and you say, be here now, and you focus all your energy back to that moment, then when you get to the tennis court, you can say be here now and focus your energy back to that moment. But if you practice being distracted, you become distracted. So we become our habits. So we got to be very careful about what we do off the tennis court so we can do the right things on the tennis court. You can't have a great mental game off the tennis court and then or let me say it this way. You can't think that you're going to have a great mental game on the tennis court if you don't do the stuff off the tennis court, right? It's all combined, right? So the last point I want to talk about is being inspired to practice and compete. And of course, you can probably see my favorite players are Rafa and Roger. And just from a lot of standpoints, right? Just watching them play is amazing. Unbelievable tennis. I mean, come on. It's unbelievable when they play, especially together. I know that too. But what I love about Rafa is, he's always in this growth mindset. He always said, when I go to practice, I always want to learn one thing. I always want to get one thing better. And, think about how good his serve has gotten over the last 10 years. Amazing. And, I know Roger has been working on his backhand. It's gotten better. But they're always working on stuff. So they have a growth mindset, but they also have a champion mindset, which means they want to win. They want to win majors and tournaments. And so it's a combination. A lot of people, they just want to get better, and that's okay. But you also want to have a champion mindset. You got to compete. You got to play tournaments, because that's like the laboratory. Tournaments are like the laboratory to see what you're doing wrong and what you're doing right, because you put so much pressure on yourself, and then you can go back and work on that stuff. But if you don't compete, it's really hard to get to an advanced level. So you got to have a growth mindset. Every time you go onto the tennis court, you got to have a couple goals that you want to improve upon. And you also should have a champion mindset. That combination together allows you to raise your game under pressure and be the best tennis player you can be. The other thing I wanted to say is this, which is really related to practice. And let me first ask you, when you ask any athlete from any sport, and we'll just put it here for tennis, what's the number one gripe, complaint they usually have? And it's this: they can't take their best game from practice to competition. They play really well in practice, but in competition, they fold. They don't know how to perform in the storm. Well, that's called transfer, right? Well, one of the ways that you can improve upon that is this principle. You got to understand that practice is one animal, competition is another animal. The farther they are apart, there's less transfer. The closer you can get them, the greater the transfer. Now, they're never going to be the same, but they can get close. So, for instance, when you practice, you got to put a lot of pressure on yourself. Hit 10 first serves in a row. And if you don't hit 10 first serves in a row, you can't leave. So when you get to that 8th serve and that 9th serve, then you're going to feel the pressure, or whatever it is. The idea is you got to hit 20 in a row. Whatever it is, the more pressure you put on yourself, which is more like competition, the greater your game transfers. And the other side of the coin is that when you have the 3 R's in your routine, when you're relaxed and you have rhythm and reactive mind, you know who you are, you can choose confidence, then this pressure in competition gets lessened, and it comes more to the practice realm, and they get closer. And so your game will transfer. So using the MAP mental game system, using those 5 keys allows you, what we all want to do is play our best under pressure, perform in the storm, right? That's what it's all about. It's not how good we are when we're practicing and just goofing around. We all want to play great under pressure. That's what it's all about, right? When we're just playing with our buddies or playing a tournament, we want to play at our potential. And that's why we practice. We put all that extra time and we work out or whatever it is. We want to perform in the storm. And so you got to get those 2 worlds closer together. And again, I just want to point out is if you, I don't have it on this slide either, but if you, the online course helps with the mental game, because it has the five keys we talked about today. Every key has videos, articles, and applied exercises. If you use the promo code USPTA175, you get it for that price. You get, I think it's 3 or 4 continuing education credits for the USPTA because it's been approved for continuing education. But, there's a lot of free stuff on the site too, so go ahead and enjoy it. And, of course, tennis is hard, right? We all know tennis is hard. Playing tennis under pressure is even harder. Playing tennis in competition is harder, but it's fun. It's fun, and it becomes more fun when you play well. And the idea is when you've mastered the mental game, It's like using both hands. You know, if you're only working on the physical game, you're only using one hand. But when you master the mental game, it's like you're using both hands and to play your best. And so that's why I think today's webinar is so important, is because it allows you to understand how to work on the mental game, and so that you can move in the right direction, so that you can perform in the storm and raise your game under pressure. So it was definitely an honor and privilege for you to hear me today, and I hope you enjoyed it. And I think we have a little time for, let me see, I don't have my cell phone on, but if Pat, if we want to open it up for a couple questions, I think we have a little time, right?
Yes, we do have some time. And at this point, through our chat, I have just asked if we have any questions. Gosh, you did a great job. Great information. Thank you so much. So here's one from James Porter. He's saying, where do you differ from the mental game of tennis? Love to hear some differences.
What does that mean,
Would that be mental game? Would that be from Dr. Layer?
I don't know. I don't know what the
Tim, he says.
The inner game, maybe the inner game of tennis.
Probably.
Okay, the inner game's cool. Yeah. Well, you know, let me just talk about what the inner game is. You know, of course, Tim Galloway started, I read that book in the 70s. It's one concept, which is very important. It's really about, you know, I think it's self one, self two, in the sense that self one is being reactive, having a reactive mind, and self two is like the ego and overthinking. And he's basically saying in the book is let go of the analytical mind, the ego, the outcome, and you'll be in the moment, you'll control your emotions. So I totally agree with all that. We kind of touched a little bit on that, but that's what the whole book is pretty much about. And it's, you know, it was kind of the forerunner of most sports psychology books. And so, you know, it was a great step, but there's just so much more than that too.
Okay. Any other questions?
Okay. I have a question. So you talked about the kind of arousal level, like from 0 to say 100 of where you're playing your very best. Have you come across players that have a different level of arousal where they're playing their best when they're playing singles versus doubles?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's pretty similar. You know, I think their intensity level is going to be pretty similar. So let's say they figured out they got to be at an 80, right? Well, if they got to go to a 40 because their partner, that 80 is too high for their partner, then that's not a good partnership. So they probably have figured out, you know, going back to Flack and Seguso, they just were so, you know, they clicked so well. And I know Flack, Ken told me they meshed, you know, personality-wise. I think that's the secret. You know, you got to figure out, well, if I play 80, my best, I'm at 80 for singles, I need to be 80 for doubles. And if I got to change it because of my partner, then there's something wrong.
Okay.
Here's another, we have another question or two. What is the main cause of collapsing after a good start?
Well, again, going back to the mental game system, it's hard to answer that because everybody's unique, everybody's different. You know, some people, maybe they got tired. Some people got nervous. So it's hard to answer that, but most of the time when they collapse, it's, you know, it's kind of like closing out a set, right? A lot of people, they're, let's say, up 5-2, and they have a tough time closing out the set. Why is that? Because now instead of being in the moment, they're thinking about outcome. And once you think about outcome, your emotions go like this. But going back to Rafa, if you play every point the same, it doesn't matter if you're 5-2, you know, 30 all, or if it's the first game of the set. If you play every point the same, it's a lot easier to close out the set.
That's awesome. How do you help juniors understand the mental game is just as or more important than the physical game? They're always wanting to train and work on their strokes.
And again, that's just you showing them how important it is. Maybe it's showing them how this one player maybe doesn't have the greatest strokes, but they keep on winning. because they're so mentally tough. I know there's a great book called by Brad Gilbert called Winning Ugly, right? I bet a lot of you have read that, but it's a great book. And it's because he really didn't have great looking strokes. Brad and I remember him at Pepperdine, and he played. He's a couple years older than I am, and but he kept on winning, right? I think he played number 4 or 5 at Pepperdine. He wasn't even that good in college, and then he came on the tour, and he was pretty much. I think he got to like number 4 in the world or 5 in the world. It's crazy because his mental game was so strong. So the idea is, if you can show them some of these players who don't have perfect strokes but they win, there's something more than the physical, and it's going to be the mental, right?
Okay, so just to confirm, you're saying it's good if you have somebody that would be a model for them where they can see either in your program or in another program that maybe they play against, and help them to see that, look, you just lost to this person that doesn't hit the ball near as good as you, but look what they did to you.
Yeah, that's a good clarification. And again, that's just one example.
Yeah.
I think the main example is if the coach or the teacher continually emphasizes how important the mental game is. They talk about, after a match, why they didn't play their best, and it can't be physical. It's got to be more than this physical. Then they're start believing it.
That's good. Here's another one. They said for the lower level players, more than a beginner, but not much. So they don't really know their technical part very well. So how do you get them to work on visualization?
You emphasize it. Like when you're learning to serve, I remember when I was learning to serve and you're learning the kicker, I was told to kind of peel the orange. So the idea is, you're just entering some basic visualizations, or like volleying, you're holding up the tray of drinks because you'll spill them in the net. When you're tossing up the elevator shaft, the idea is that you're incorporating all these visualizations as you're teaching these basic skills. And we know actually that visualization helps with motor programming. So when you use visualization, it actually helps you learn the skill better.
That's good. Kevin?
Well, I've got one more question. So what about for player? Your presentation presupposes that players are attempting to improve their skills, get better and better. How do you recommend that someone, let's say that a player was formerly very, very good, they played in college, and they're continuing to play as they've gotten older, and because they've got a life now and a job and maybe a family, they don't have the time to devote to their game anymore. So they're seeing their skills diminish to some extent. Where does your tools fit into that kind of mindset to still enjoy playing tennis and play well, realizing that your skills may not be where they once were?
And that's for everybody as you age too, right? You can't be as fast as you were. You're not as flexible. You're not as strong. So that relates to the principle of expectations. Your expectations have to be realistic. So the idea is that your serve is going to your serve is going to go a little slower because maybe you've lost muscle mass and flexibility. You can't run as fast. So the idea is that if you don't lower your expectations, you're not going to have fun. I should say not lower your expectations, have realistic expectations. And if you don't practice as much because you have a family, you got to have more realistic expectations. So the idea is that if our expectations don't change, we're not going to have fun. And ultimately, why do you play tennis? When are you out there to win trophies when you're 60 years old? No, you're out there for fun and exercise, enjoying your friends. So you got to kind of change the perspective of winning and getting your ego, let's say your ego, your self-esteem points from winning. You need to feel better about yourself because you're out there enjoying the good weather and your friends and you're having fun. And so you got to start changing your perspective of what you get from tennis.
Okay, that helps. Thank you.
I don't see anything else for questions, so I think that's good.
Yeah, it's been a privilege. Thank you.